Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Irene and I have recently finished my dietetic internship, passed the RD exam, and am officially a registered dietitian. So today I wanted to talk about how I passed the RD exam on my first try with less than a month of studying and without studying for 8 hours a day. So first things first, it's really important to understand how the exam is structured and what the exam is going to cover. So the exam is going to cover 4 different domains. 2 of them are kind of more clinical and 2 of them are a little bit more food service. You can find all the details to what exactly is covered on the exam on the CDR's website. They have a really extensive study outline that's great to kind of look through and kind of understand the topics that will be on the exam. So the exam consists of 125 to 145 questions, with 25 of those being test questions. And that means that they don't count for your exam, so there's no points attached to them if you get them right or wrong. It doesn't really matter, but the test makers just want to put them in there to kind of see how people do on them and to help them determine whether or not it should become a real test question in the future for someone else. So your exam will consist of 100 to 120 real test questions that are counting for points. And the reason why there is that range is because it's considered an adaptive exam. So it will kind of give you more questions in areas that you might be weaker in, and also if you haven't reached enough points by the time you've gotten to that 125th question, it'll give you a couple more chances to answer some more questions and then maybe get enough points to reach whatever the score is that you need. And that brings me to my next point, which this is probably the most frustrating part about the exam, but no one really knows how the exam is graded. So what we do know is that it is graded from 0 to 50, with 25 being the passing score, but no one really knows how many questions you need to get right or what percentage of the questions you need to get right is, because the questions are all weighted differently based on their difficulty. So maybe if you got a lot of easy questions, you might need to get a lot more questions right. And if you got a lot more harder questions, you might need to get less questions right in order to pass. But I'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the video and how I prepared and knew I was kind of ready based on my practice exams. So now that you know a little bit about the exam, let's talk about study resources. So before I took on this journey of studying for my exam, I looked at lots of blogs and things to kind of see what people use to study for the exam. So there were a whole ton of resources. Some recommended Gene Inman, Eat Right Prep, Visual Veggies, All Access Dietetics, Pocket Prep, and several others, which were pretty costly, especially if you're taking into consideration that to register for the exam it's $200. I was not about to spend $1,000 to take this exam to not make a lot of money. I decided that the one that I would buy would be Eat Right Prep. So there are a couple of reasons why I chose this one. For one, it was created by the Academy of Dietetics, so I figured that it would kind of be most closely aligned with questions that I would find on the exam. Number 2, Eat Right Prep gives you a lot of practice questions and practice exams and things like that, and I just know from previous experience studying for standardized tests, SAT, ACT, etc., that I really do best if I just do a lot of practice questions, getting familiar with how questions are set up, the kind of material that you need to know on the exam, things like that. That kind of stuff you don't really pick up unless you're doing lots of practice questions. So that's kind of the 2 main reasons that I decided to choose Eat Right Prep. Some of the other resources that I did have at my disposal were Gene Inman. My school, after I started studying, did give me access to the 2017 Gene Inman recordings, the guide, and materials and things like that, but I did not find myself really using it that much. I did put the recordings on in the car sometimes, but I don't really think I retained a lot of information that way. I think maybe I only got like 2 or 3 questions that I remembered from the recording on my actual exam. So in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really help that much. And if you're paying for Gene Inman on your own, I don't know if it would be worth it for you. So the last resource that I did have also was Pocket Prep, and that one I didn't really use a whole ton. I got their free version, so they do have a couple of questions for you, like I think it's about 30, and then they have the question of the day, which is from their premium question bank. I used it kind of sparsely, just here and there whenever I thought about it, had the time, was waiting in line or something, whatever. But that is also another pretty good resource, and it's not too expensive either, and it has tons of questions, kind of like Eat Right Prep, and they give you explanations as well. So next I want to talk about my study schedule. The way I structured my study schedule was to not have a study schedule, to be honest. I basically studied whenever I could, and kind of the beauty about just doing practice questions as your form of studying is that you can start and stop whenever. I did not dedicate a certain number of days to studying a certain domain because I was kind of studying all of the domains while I was doing the practice questions, so it wasn't like split up or anything, and there wasn't the pressure of me like being behind if I wasn't able to get to it that day or something like that. So it really offered me a lot of flexibility to, you know, take a day off in case something came up, or if I needed to run errands, or if in my case I needed to move to a new city. So it was really awesome to give me flexibility and to really take the pressure off of me. So then you might be asking, how much time did I spend studying in total? So I would say about 5 to 6 hours for the first week when I was back at home and I didn't have anything to do. Of course, I was also packing as well, so I mean, I did have some things to do, but it wasn't like I was working all day or something. And then I moved, and then the couple of days that I was moving, I did not study at all. I did not have the time or the energy to do any of that, so I just forgot about it then. And then after I started my new job, I would say I got about 2 to 3 hours every day. I'm really lucky that my job gave me the flexibility to study, like if I had time, of course, given that I finished all my work, so that really helped a lot. So 2 to 3 hours on those days for about, I'd say like 2 weeks. So in total, I would say anywhere from 60 to 80 hours is what I really spent studying, which isn't a whole ton if you think about it for an exam that covers so much information. Of course, you know, I did go through all my coursework and things like that, my internship that I really learned a lot from. So there's other things that I gathered knowledge from, not just from studying. So that kind of gives you some perspective into how much time you should at minimum dedicate to studying. So all in all, I don't think that I studied an extreme number of hours, but instead I made sure that my study method was very efficient. So I based my method off of a webinar that I watched from All Access Dietetics. It's totally free, you can go watch it, and their website also has tons of free resources as well that you can definitely go check out. But basically they talked about how they sort of teach their RD exam prep courses, and what they do is they go through practice questions and they kind of think through it, and you know, they play around with it and be like, oh, what would happen if this part of the question was changed or altered, and then they also go through all of the answer choices as well and talk about why it's not right or things like that. So they really dive deep into the questions, and I thought that that was a really great way to kind of understand more about the topic, since there are a lot of topics on the exam. That's kind of what my study method was based off of. So in terms of actually going through the practice exams and practice questions, basically what I would do is I would go through the whole practice test, or I go through like a certain number of practice questions, let's say like 20, and then I would use the approach that I just talked about, researching anything that I didn't know, using other resources to supplement that knowledge. If the Eat Right Prep explanation didn't give me enough information, or there were some other things that I was curious about, And then I would write down the explanation and any other pertinent information, like on a piece of paper with a pencil, like actually like writing it down, because I figured out from 18 years of schooling that when I write things down physically with pen and paper, I am more likely to remember it. So after that, I would type it into this document that I had organized. Basically, I just copied the study outline from CDR onto a Google Doc, and then I would put in the explanation, like type it in to whichever section I thought it was more pertinent in. And what that did basically is it would force me to read it again and make sure that, yes, I understand what I just wrote, and that I did not blindly just, you know how sometimes you write things down and you're like looking at something but you're not actually processing it. It would force me to kind of process it again and, just double check that yes, I understand that. Basically, I did that and repeated the process for all of the test questions and pre-test questions, practice exams on Eat Right Prep. If I had more time, or if I felt that I would need some more practice or something like that, I would also do that for the questions on Pocket Prep as well. So how did I know that I was ready to take the exam? Well, to be honest, I really just wanted to get my exam over with as soon as possible because I was already working as a dietitian before I got the email to register for the exam. Basically, my director was checking off all my assessments, and so I just didn't really want it to loom over my head. So as soon as I got that email, I scheduled it for the soonest possible date that would fit into my work schedule, which meant that I took it on a Thursday at 5 p.m. after work, which is really random. But I felt like moderately confident going into the exam because my preceptor and my director, they were pretty confident that I would pass. And I also felt, just based on the practice exams and things like that, that I was making a good enough score to pass. And that kind of brings me to my next point. So I was really glad that I got Eat Right Prep. Actually, on Eat Right Prep, they give you the kind of the difficulty that they would rate each question. So whether it's easy, moderate, difficult, or expert. And then that way, when you're going through and reviewing the questions to like a practice exam, you can see like, oh yeah, I got a lot of these questions wrong because they're considered expert level. So there's a lot more specific knowledge and thinking that's required to get this question right. And this question's also probably worth a lot more points on the exam. So just sort of knowing that kind of helped to ease my anxiety about the exam. And additionally, on the dashboard of the Eat Right Prep course, they'll tell you what percentile that you're in all of those students that are taking the course. So I think I was somewhere in the 70th percentile, and then they'll also tell you like how they would rate your proficiency in each of the 4 domains. So I was either advanced or like on the higher side of proficient in all 4 domains. But because I'm a little extra, I decided to devise my own scoring system to see if I could try and hack their scoring system. So Eat Right Prep, as you know, assigns 1 of 4 difficulties to each question. So I arbitrarily assigned a point value to each difficulty level. So easy questions were worth 1 point, moderate was worth 2, difficult was worth 3, and expert was worth 4. Once I finished the Right Prep exam, you can go through and you can filter by difficulty, correctness, and also the domains. And so I would filter it by the difficulty and then also like correctness. So I write down the number of correct questions I got in each difficulty out of the total questions in that difficulty. And then I would go through and I would multiply the point value that I assigned by the number of questions that I got right to find the point value that I got for that difficulty level. And then I would multiply that point value also by the total number of questions. So there's kind of 2 numbers there. And then I would do that for all 4 difficulties, and then I would tally up the points that I earned out of the total points, and then I would divide those 2 numbers and you get a number that's less than 1, and I would multiply that number by 50 to kind of approximate my score. So I have no idea if this is anywhere near kind of what they do, but I will say that I consistently scored a 30 to 35 based on this scoring method, and on my actual exam I got a 32. Maybe it's a fluke, but for me that was good enough, and it gave me the confidence that I needed to go in there and just crush my exam. And it felt better than just purely going off of a numerical percentage score, because it could be that you just got a lot of easy questions in that test, which may not be worth as many points. It was just a better way for me to gauge how I was doing. So now that you know how to study, what I use to study, I want to also talk about exam day, because that is also important as well. You can do all the practice tests that you want, but if you get to exam day and you feel like things are unexpected, it can really throw you off. So you should know that when you're registering for your exam, to plan to get there 30 minutes early, because there actually is kind of like a process to get into the actual exam room. So you don't want to really be late. And that means that you are going to go into Google Maps, figure out how long it's going to take you to get from where you are that day and at that time to that place, and then you add 15 minutes. So you leave 15 minutes earlier to make sure that you get there on time. You know, that'll help to account for traffic and you having to find the building or find where it's located in a building. That'll help to ease any stress, you know, because you know you're gonna get there early, or at least somewhat on time, and that you're not going to have to be rushed for the exam. So when you get to the site, the testing center may have various protocols because of COVID. I know my site asked me to go to the bathroom and wash my hands first before I was allowed to enter. And then once I washed my hands, I had to stand by the door while they processed some other guy that was there to take his exam. So they may have like different procedures or whatever, which will make the checking in process a little bit longer. So do plan for that and make sure that you bring your ID. They will take your picture, check your ID, and have you put your belongings in a locker. And then once you kind of do that check-in process, they do your palm scan and everything, you'll be led to this kind of back room where there's a bunch of like different cubicles with computers and lots of other people taking tests. Most people are taking probably a different exam because these centers do offer a variety of different exams. And then they'll ask you to like roll up your sleeves, pat yourself down, things like that, give you a whiteboard or something and a marker and ask you if you want a calculator. You can ask for like a physical calculator if you don't like using the one on the screen, but you can't bring your own. And in case you're worried about the noise, they also do have headphones to block out some of that sound. But once you get logged into a computer, you'll have the option to go through this tutorial, which will kind of show you how it's set up. And I kid you not, it looks like it's something from the 2000s because it's like a square shaped screen, whereas like the monitors nowadays are like rectangles, so it doesn't even fill up the whole monitor, and then it looks really old and dated and nothing like what Eat Right Prep looks like, which is what I thought it might look like because they say that they have 2 simulated exams, but the simulated exams on Eat Right Prep, maybe they're simulated in the way that they're adaptive, but nothing like how it's set up or anything like that. So just know to expect something different if you do get Eat Right Prep. The exam does not look like that. So once you go through the questions, you won't be able to go back, and there is going to be like a little thing on the top that'll tell you how many questions you've answered so far. So I personally on the 125th question was so nervous because my preceptor had told me that when she took the exam just shut off whenever like she was done. So I was like, is the exam just gonna shut off after I finish this question, or am I gonna have like 20 more questions? But as soon as I hit next, it told me that the exam had ended and that I had to complete a survey, but it did not tell me whether I passed or not. So I was just thinking in my head, I either did really great or I did really poorly. Like maybe there's no way that I could pass with the next 20 questions, so it just decided to shut off. So I was really nervous, but the survey just kind of asked me like, how did I prepare for the exam? How was the environment that day? Etc. But finally, at the end of the survey, it did give me my score and said I passed, and also my 2 sub-scores. So the sub-scores are kind of just for your information. They don't add up to mean anything. They're just kind of how you did in each section. So once you do reach that last page where it tells you whether or not you pass, you can raise your hand, let your proctor know, and they'll lead you back to the front to grab your stuff and then give you a paper copy of your results. And then you're done. You can go home and celebrate. So that basically is my experience studying for and taking the RD exam. Let me know in the comments if you found this helpful, and be sure to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.